Jacob Thorne had repaired armor for pirates, mercenaries, and war heroes, but he'd never expected the Voidborn Queen herself to darken his workshop doorway. The massive figure that entered his modest repair facility on Haven's Edge moved with the fluid grace that made her species legendary in combat, each step calculated and precise despite her imposing 8-foot frame. Her biomechanical armor was a work of art as much as protection, obsidian black chitinous plates that seemed to grow from her body rather than being worn over it, connected by energy conduits that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The armor's surface was covered in intricate designs that told the story of countless victories, while the integrated weapon systems and sensory arrays marked her as apex predator made manifest. "Master Thorne," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked Voidborn communication, processed through her armor's translation matrix into perfect English. "I require your services." Jacob set down his plasma torch and studied his unexpected visitor. Queen Zexthera was a living legend, the undefeated ruler of the Voidborn collective who had maintained peace through strength for over 15 years. Her mere presence in his workshop was unprecedented. "Your Majesty," he said, offering the respectful nod that served as formal greeting to her species. "I'm honored, but I should mention that I specialize in human and Standard Alliance armor systems. Voidborn biomechanical integration is outside my expertise." "Perhaps. But your reputation suggests otherwise." The Queen moved deeper into his workshop, her sensors scanning his equipment with obvious interest. "They say you can repair anything, that you understand the fusion of technology and biology better than anyone in this sector." Jacob felt a flutter of unease. His reputation was built on discretion as much as skill. Clients came to him because he asked no questions and revealed nothing about their business. But the Voidborn Queen's presence suggested this was no ordinary repair job. "What kind of damage are we talking about?" he asked, activating his diagnostic scanner. "Internal systems primarily. Combat stress, environmental exposure, general wear from extended deployment." Her response was carefully neutral, but Jacob's trained eye was already cataloging inconsistencies in her armor's appearance. The damage patterns were wrong for combat stress. The microfractures in her chitinous plates followed stress lines that suggested system overload rather than weapon impacts. The energy conduits showed signs of chronic instability, and several biomechanical interfaces displayed were patterns that shouldn't exist in properly functioning Voidborn armor. "May I?" Jacob gestured toward his scanner, and she nodded permission. The readings that came back made him frown. Energy signatures didn't match standard Voidborn biomechanical systems, structural composition showed anomalies that defied his understanding of their technology, and most puzzling, he was detecting human-compatible interface protocols buried deep in the armor's programming. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I'm seeing some unusual readings. This armor appears to have been extensively modified with non-Voidborn technology." For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw something like fear flash across her alien features. The modifications were necessary for diplomatic functions. Interfacing with technologies from multiple species requires adaptability. It was a reasonable explanation, but Jacob's instincts told him there was more to the story. 20 years as a military engineer had taught him to recognize when someone was hiding the full truth about their equipment problems. "I'll need to remove sections of the armor for detailed examination," he said. "The diagnostic is showing potential failures in your life support systems that could be dangerous if left unchecked." Again, that flicker of what might have been fear. How long would such an examination require? "Several hours for a complete assessment. Longer if I find the problems I suspect are there." Jacob met her gaze directly. "Your Majesty, whatever's wrong with this armor, it's serious. The energy reading suggests systems that are on the verge of critical failure." The Queen was silent for a long moment, her alien features unreadable behind the armor's biomechanical mask. When she finally spoke, there was something almost vulnerable in her harmonic voice. "Master Thorne, I must ask for your complete discretion in this matter. The nature of my condition cannot become known to my people or to the galactic community. You have my word," Jacob replied without hesitation. Everything that happens in this workshop stays confidential. Very well. She moved to the center of his workspace, her imposing figure casting long shadows under the overhead lights. Begin your examination. But understand that what you discover here today may burden you with knowledge that could endanger us both. Jacob activated his workshop's privacy shields and began powering up his most sophisticated diagnostic equipment. Your Majesty, I've kept secrets for everyone from fugitive rebels to corporate spies. Whatever this is about, I can handle it. As he prepared to begin the armor removal process, the Queen spoke again, her voice so quiet that his equipment barely picked it up. I hope so, Master Thorn. Because if you cannot repair what is broken, I will be dead within days. The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Jacob realized he was about to become privy to something that could shake the foundations of interstellar politics, something that the most powerful ruler in known space had been hiding from the entire galaxy. He activated his armor removal protocols and began the delicate process of separating the Queen from her biomechanical shell, knowing that each component he removed brought him closer to a truth that would change everything he thought he knew about the Voidborn and their legendary ruler. The first section of chitinous plating came away with a soft hiss of escaping pressure, revealing not the expected biomechanical interface, but something that made Jacob's hands freeze in mid-motion. Beneath the fearsome exterior of the Voidborn Queen was unmistakably human skin. Your Majesty, he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, what exactly am I looking at? The Queen's shoulders sagged as if a great weight had been lifted and replaced with an even heavier burden. The truth, Master Thorn. The truth that could destroy everything I've built. As more of the armor came away, revealing the elaborate life support systems that had been maintaining an impossible deception, Jacob realized he wasn't just repairing damaged equipment, he was uncovering the most closely guarded secret in the galaxy. And somehow, he was now part of it. The woman who emerged from the Voidborn Queen's armor was nothing like what Jacob had expected to find. Where he'd anticipated alien biology and biomechanical interfaces, he discovered a human female in her early 40s, pale from years without natural sunlight, connected to the armor's life support systems by an intricate network of neural interfaces and biomimetic processors. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, she said, her voice now carrying a distinctly human accent without the armor's harmonic modulation. Or rather, it was. I've been Queen Zexthera for so long that sometimes I forget which identity is real. Jacob sat heavily in his work chair, trying to process what he was seeing. You're human. The most feared ruler in 3-star systems is a human woman in an elaborate disguise. Not a disguise, Elena corrected, gesturing to the complex machinery that surrounded her exposed form. A complete biological transformation. This armor doesn't just make me look like a Voidborn, it makes me functionally Voidborn. It regulates my metabolism, translates my thoughts into their pheromone-based communication, even modifies my cellular structure to match their physiology. That's impossible. The technology required for that level of biomimicry was experimental 15 years ago when I first put it on. It was supposed to be temporary, a few weeks at most while we worked out the political crisis. Elena's expression grew distant. I was part of the original First Contact team, a xenobiologist specializing in interspecies communication. When the real Queen Zexthera was assassinated during the peace negotiations, the entire process was about to collapse into war. Jacob began examining the biomimetic interfaces more closely, marveling at the sophistication of the technology. So you took her place. Someone had to. The Voidborn political structure is built around absolute loyalty to their queen. Without her, the various military castes would have started fighting each other for dominance while simultaneously declaring war on every species they blamed for her death. Elena watched him work with a mixture of hope and resignation. I thought I could maintain the deception just long enough for a proper successor to emerge. But no successor came. The Voidborn don't choose new queens, they're born to the role, genetically selected from royal bloodlines. Zexthera was the last of her line. Elena's voice carried the weight of 15 years of impossible choices. So I stayed. And kept staying. And now. Now the systems are failing, Jacob finished, understanding the true scope of the crisis. This armor wasn't designed for long-term use. The biomimetic processors are breaking down, the neural interfaces are causing severe strain on my nervous system, and the metabolic regulators are slowly poisoning me. Elena met his eyes directly. According to my private medical scans, I have perhaps weeks before the cumulative damage becomes irreversible. Jacob studied the readouts from his diagnostic equipment, seeing the full extent of the problems. Why come to me? Surely there are specialists who understand this technology better. Because those specialists work for governments and corporations that would see enormous political advantage in exposing my secret, Elena replied. The knowledge that the Void-born Queen is actually human would trigger the very wars I've spent 15 years preventing. You're the only person I've found with the skills to help and the reputation for absolute discretion. The Void-born don't know. They suspect nothing. To them, I am their queen, I speak their language, understand their culture, make decisions they respect. The armor translates not just my words but my thoughts, my emotional patterns, even my pheromone responses. As far as they're concerned, I am Zexthero. Jacob began carefully examining the neural interface connections, noting the elegant but deteriorating biomechanical links. This is incredible work. Whoever designed these systems was a genius. Dr. Michael Chen, the team's biotechnology specialist. He died in the same attack that killed the real queen. Elena's voice grew sad. I'm probably the only person left who fully understands how these systems work, and that knowledge is incomplete. Elena, Jacob said, using her real name for the first time, do you realize what you've accomplished? You've maintained peace between dozens of species, prevented countless wars, preserved the void-born culture while adapting it for modern galactic politics. Even if the deception ends tomorrow, you've saved millions of lives. At the cost of my own identity, my own life. She gestured to her pale, technology-dependent form. I can never be human again, Jacob. Even if I revealed the truth and somehow survived the political consequences, my biology has been so altered by 15 years in this armor that I couldn't survive without it. Jacob felt something twist in his chest at the quiet desperation in her voice. What if we could make it work properly? What if instead of just repairing the failing systems, I redesigned them to be sustainable long-term? Elena's eyes widened with hope she was clearly afraid to feel. Is that possible? I don't know, Jacob admitted. But I'd like to try. These biomimetic processors, the neural interfaces, the metabolic regulators, they're all first-generation prototypes pushed far beyond their design parameters. With modern components and some creative engineering. You'd be committing yourself to maintaining the deception, Elena warned. If you help me, you become part of the secret. Part of the lie that's kept the peace for 15 years. Jacob looked at this remarkable woman who had sacrificed everything to prevent galactic war, who had given up her very identity to preserve peace, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, purpose beyond mere craftsmanship. Elena, I've spent 10 years fixing other people's equipment, keeping their secrets, helping them maintain the facades they need to survive. This is just a bigger facade for more important reasons. The risks are worth it, Jacob interrupted. Not just for the political stability, but for you. For the chance to help someone who's given everything for others get something back for herself. Elena studied his face with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read people across species barriers. Why? You barely know me. I know enough, Jacob replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I know you're brave enough to sacrifice your identity for peace, intelligent enough to rule a warrior species for 15 years, and strong enough to carry secrets that would crush most people. I know you came here not just seeking repair, but hoping someone might finally understand what you've endured. Tears began forming in Elena's eyes, the first purely human expression he'd seen from her. It's been so long since someone knew who I really was. Well, now someone does, Jacob said gently. And I'm going to make sure you survive long enough for that to matter. As he began the complex process of planning upgrades to her life support systems, Jacob realized he wasn't just repairing armor, he was helping to preserve one of the most important deceptions in galactic history. And somewhere in the process, he was falling for the woman brave enough to become someone else entirely to save the galaxy from itself. Outside his workshop, the business of Haven's Edge continued normally, unaware that the fate of interstellar peace was being decided by an armorsmith and the human woman who had become an alien queen. Over the following 3 days, as Jacob worked to redesign Elena's life support systems, their relationship evolved from professional necessity into something deeper and more complex. The intimacy required for the biomechanical modifications, Jacob's hands working inches from her skin as he installed new neural interfaces, Elena trusting him with not just her secret but her physical vulnerability, created a bond neither had expected. "Tell me about before," Elena said during one of their longer sessions, her voice soft as Jacob carefully calibrated a new metabolic processor. "Before you became Haven's Edge's most discreet armorsmith. You have military training, I can see it in how you work." Jacob paused in his adjustments, his hands stilling on the delicate biomechanical components. Engineering Corps, 23rd Frontier Battalion. 15 years designing and maintaining combat systems for some of the nastiest conflicts in human space. What changed? Kepler, 452b. We were supporting a colonial defense against raiders, and I designed a new targeting system for their planetary defense grid. It was supposed to be precise, surgical, eliminate threats while protecting civilians. Jacob's voice grew quiet. Instead, my targeting algorithms malfunctioned and wiped out a refugee camp. 800 innocent people died because of my work. Elena reached out and touched his hand, the first purely human contact she'd initiated in years. "That's why you left the military. That's why I swore I'd never build anything designed to kill again. I came out here to fix things instead of breaking them, to help people instead of." He gestured helplessly at the memory. "And now you're helping maintain the biggest lie in galactic politics," Elena said with gentle irony. "How does that fit with your desire to fix rather than break?" Jacob considered the question as he resumed his work on her neural interfaces. "Because what you've built. This deception, this false identity, it's not destructive. It's preservative. You've taken something broken, the void-born succession crisis, and fixed it in the only way possible. Even if it means I can never be myself again." "Elena," Jacob said, meeting her eyes directly, "who says you can't be yourself? You're ruling an alien species with human compassion and intelligence. You're maintaining peace through understanding rather than conquest. Maybe this is who you really are, someone who cares more about others than about personal truth. You make it sound noble. Most days it just feels like an elaborate trap." "Then let's make it less of a trap," Jacob replied, activating the new biomimetic processors he'd installed. "These upgrades should eliminate the poisoning effects and reduce the neural strain by 60%. You'll still need regular maintenance, but you won't be slowly dying anymore." Elena felt the difference immediately as the new systems came online. The constant background pain she'd endured for months faded, replaced by a sense of physical well-being she'd almost forgotten. "Jacob, this is incredible. I feel human again." "You are human," he said firmly. "The armor doesn't change that, it just gives you the tools to help people across species barriers." Their moment of triumph was interrupted by an urgent chime from Elena's communication system. Jacob watched her expression shift from relief to concern as she processed the incoming message. "What is it?" he asked. "Military commanders requesting immediate strategic conference. There's been an incident in the Outer Rim, 3 species are mobilizing for what could become a major conflict." Elena was already moving toward her armor, her movements taking on the decisive efficiency of Queen Zexthera. "I need to address this before it escalates. The new systems aren't fully calibrated yet," Jacob warned. The neural interfaces might not translate your thoughts properly until I finish the integration protocols. I don't have a choice. If I don't respond as Queen immediately, the commanders will interpret it as weakness or indifference. Elena paused at the armor assembly station. Jacob, if something goes wrong, if the deception fails. It won't fail, he said firmly, beginning the rapid armor installation process. We'll make it work. As the biomechanical components sealed around Elena's human form, Jacob watched her transformation from vulnerable woman to imposing alien ruler. But now, knowing the person beneath the armor, he could see the subtle signs of her humanity that others would miss, the slight hesitation before each decisive gesture, the way her alien posture retained distinctly human grace. "How do I look?" she asked, her voice once again carrying the harmonic undertones of void-born communication. "Like a queen," Jacob replied. "Like someone who belongs in that armor." The strategic conference took place in the main administrative complex, and Jacob found himself officially designated as technical consultant to provide cover for his presence. He watched from the observation area as Elena commanded a room full of void-born military leaders, each one capable of devastating entire fleets in personal combat. The Centauri Mining Consortium has violated the Nexus Accords by establishing armed installations in neutral space, Elena announced, her presence dominating the chamber. "This threatens the balance we have maintained for over a decade." "Your Majesty," said one of the commanders, his scarred carapace marking him as a veteran of countless battles, "the humans involved are protected by alliance treaties. Direct action could trigger broader conflict." "Which is precisely why we will not take direct action," Elena replied smoothly. "Instead, we will offer our services as mediators. The consortium wants mining rights, the local species want territorial sovereignty. There is room for compromise that serves everyone's interests." Jacob watched in fascination as Elena navigated the complex political discussion, using void-born cultural concepts to promote solutions that were fundamentally human in their emphasis on cooperation over conquest. Her commanders accepted her guidance not just because of her authority, but because her solutions consistently proved successful. It was during the third hour of discussions that the new biomimetic systems began to malfunction. Jacob noticed at first, subtle fluctuations in Elena's harmonic voice patterns, slight delays in her pheromone responses that the void-born commanders would eventually detect as anomalous. The hasty installation hadn't allowed proper calibration time, and the neural interfaces were struggling to translate her increasingly complex emotional responses. Through the observation area's communication system, Jacob sent Elena an urgent private message: "Neural interface instability. You need to end this session soon." Elena's response came back immediately: "Cannot disengage without resolution. Political necessity overrides technical problems." Jacob realized he was about to watch 15 years of careful deception unravel in real time unless he could somehow stabilize her systems remotely. The problem was that the necessary adjustments required direct access to her armor's internal components, impossible while she was wearing it in full view of her military commanders. Then inspiration struck. Jacob activated his workshop's emergency diagnostic system and established a remote connection to Elena's armor. To the commanders, it would appear as if she was consulting with her technical advisor about strategic possibilities. In reality, Jacob was performing delicate calibration adjustments on her biomimetic systems while she maintained her royal composure. The next 10 minutes were the most nerve-wracking of Jacob's life as he fine-tuned neural pathways and stabilized harmonic translators while Elena coolly discussed military deployment strategies with her commanders. Any wrong adjustment could expose her humanity to the very people she'd spent 15 years leading. Finally, the system stabilized. Elena's voice patterns returned to normal, her pheromone responses synchronized properly, and the immediate crisis passed. The strategic session concluded with typical void-born efficiency, her commanders departing to implement the diplomatic solutions she'd outlined. When Elena returned to his workshop an hour later, the first thing she did was collapse into his arms, still wearing her imposing armor but trembling with human exhaustion. "I almost lost everything in there," she whispered against his shoulder. "If you hadn't been monitoring, if you hadn't found a way to help. But I was, and I did, Jacob replied, holding her despite the armor's intimidating appearance. Elena, we're going to make this work. Not just the technical systems, but all of it. What do you mean? Jacob pulled back to look at her alien features, seeing the human woman beneath the biomechanical facade. I mean, I'm not just going to repair your armor and send you back to ruling alone. I'm going to stay. I'm going to help you carry this burden. Jacob, you can't. The risk to you, the isolation, the impossibility of having any normal life. I left normal behind years ago, he interrupted. And I'd rather have an impossible life with you than a safe one without you. Elena stared at him through the armor's visual sensors, processing what he was offering. You're saying you want to be part of this deception permanently. I'm saying I want to be part of your life permanently. The deception is just the circumstances we'll have to work within. For a moment, the workshop was silent except for the quiet hum of biomechanical systems. Then Elena began the process of removing her armor, piece by careful piece, revealing her humanity to the only person in the galaxy who knew her true identity. If you're serious about this, she said as the last components came away, then you need to understand what you're choosing. I can never be just Elena again. I can never have a normal relationship, a normal life, normal anything. Then we'll build something better than normal, Jacob replied, taking her hands in his. We'll build something that's ours. As they stood together in the workshop surrounded by the technology that made her impossible existence possible, Jacob realized he wasn't just in love with Elena, he was in love with the remarkable life she'd created, the impossible balance she maintained between human heart and alien responsibility. And for the first time in 15 years, Elena allowed herself to believe that she might not have to carry her burdens alone. 6 months after Jacob first discovered Elena's secret, their partnership had evolved into something unprecedented, a human armorsmith serving as secret consort to an alien queen who was herself secretly human. Jacob had officially become her technology integration specialist, a role that gave him legitimate access to her equipment while providing cover for their growing relationship. The democratic integration protocol is working better than we hoped, Elena said as she reviewed reports in Jacob's expanded workshop, now hidden within a secure section of the royal compound. 3 more void-born military castes have agreed to joint leadership councils with civilian representatives. Jacob looked up from the advanced biomimetic systems he was developing, improvements that would eventually allow Elena greater freedom from the armor while maintaining her royal identity. How long before you think you can safely step down? Another 2 years, maybe 3. The transition has to be gradual enough that it seems like natural political evolution rather than revolutionary change. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her features with purely human warmth. But for the first time in 15 years, I can actually envision an end to this deception. Their conversation was interrupted by urgent alerts from the palace security system. Jacob's displays showed multiple incoming ships, a full diplomatic flotilla that hadn't been scheduled. Alliance Emergency Delegation, Elena said, reading the identification codes with growing concern. They're requesting immediate audience with me regarding critical security matters. Jacob felt his stomach drop. Emergency delegations usually meant someone had discovered something they shouldn't have. Could they know? I don't see how. Our security protocols are absolute, and the biomimetic upgrades you've developed are undetectable by standard scanning technology. Elena was already moving toward her armor assembly station. But we need to be prepared for anything. As Jacob helped her into the complex biomechanical system that transformed Dr. Elena Vasquez into Queen Zexthera, he couldn't shake the feeling that their carefully maintained secret was about to face its greatest test. The Alliance delegation was led by Director Sarah Chen, a woman whose resemblance to Dr. Michael Chen, the original designer of Elena's biomimetic armor, was unmistakable. Jacob felt Elena's spike of alarm through the neural monitoring systems as she recognized the delegation leader. Your Majesty, Director Chen said with formal politeness that barely concealed underlying tension, I am Director Sarah Chen of Alliance Intelligence. I believe you knew my brother, Dr. Michael Chen, who died during the original Voidborn First Contact mission. Dar. Chen was a valued colleague, Elena replied carefully, her armor systems translating her words into the harmonic patterns of Voidborn royal speech. His loss was deeply mourned by all who worked with him. Indeed. Which is why I'm here to discuss certain irregularities that have come to light regarding the events surrounding Queen Zexthara's rise to power. Jacob watched from his position as technical observer, his hands ready to provide emergency system support if Elena's biomimetic responses became unstable under stress. What irregularities? Elena asked, her voice maintaining royal composure despite what Jacob knew must be racing panic. Director Chen activated a holographic display showing complex biomechanical schematics. These are partial technical specifications recovered from my brother's personal files. They describe a prototype biomimetic system designed for temporary cross-species infiltration. The schematics were incomplete but recognizable. Early versions of the technology that now sustained Elena's identity. Jacob felt his heart hammering as he realized how close they were to complete exposure. Fascinating historical documents, Elena said smoothly. But I fail to see their relevance to current diplomatic concerns. The relevance, Your Majesty, is that these systems were designed specifically to allow humans to masquerade as Voidborn. Director Chen's eyes fixed on Elena with laser intensity. And according to our intelligence analysis, someone has been using exactly such technology for over 15 years. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Jacob saw Elena's biomechanical reading spike as her stress levels peaked, and he prepared to implement emergency stabilization protocols. But Elena surprised him. Instead of panic or denial, she seemed to find a core of absolute calm. Director Chen, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that Jacob had never heard before, you are suggesting that the Queen of the Voidborn Collective is an imposter. That is an accusation of the highest order, one that would typically be answered through formal combat to determine truth. Your Majesty, I. However, Elena continued, her presence somehow filling the chamber with royal authority, I understand the grief that drives such accusations. The loss of family creates powerful needs for answers, even when those answers might be painful or impossible to obtain. Jacob watched in amazement as Elena transformed the confrontation into something entirely different. She wasn't denying the accusations, she was reframing them as the desperate search of a grieving sister. Your brother died protecting the peace between our species, Elena said, her voice taking on genuinely regal compassion. His sacrifice made possible everything we have built together. Perhaps the real question is not whether his technology exists, but whether his legacy has been honored. Director Chen's aggressive posture wavered slightly. His legacy? 15 years of peace, Director Chen. 15 years of cooperation instead of conquest, of diplomacy instead of destruction. 15 years of proving that species as different as humans and Voidborn can work together for the greater good. Elena stepped closer, her imposing alien form somehow conveying deep human understanding. Is that not the legacy Dr. Michael Chen would have wanted? The room fell silent as Director Chen processed this unexpected response. Jacob could see the internal struggle on her face, the desire for truth warring with the recognition of what that truth might cost. Your Majesty, she said finally, my brother's files suggest that someone, somewhere, has been maintaining the most elaborate deception in galactic history. A deception that has shaped interstellar politics for over a decade. And if such a deception existed, Elena replied carefully, what would you do with that knowledge? I. Director Chen paused, clearly not having expected the question. I suppose it would depend on the consequences of revealing it. The consequences, Elena said quietly, would be the immediate collapse of every peace treaty, every trade agreement, every cooperative venture that has been built over the past 15 years. 3-star systems would likely descend into warfare within months. Millions would die. Jacob felt his breath catch as he realized what Elena was doing. She wasn't denying the accusation, she was making Director Chen complicit in the choice to maintain or destroy the deception. You're asking me to choose between truth and peace, Director Chen said. I'm asking you to consider what your brother would choose, if he were here today. Truth that destroys everything he died to protect. Or discretion that preserves his life's work. The silence stretched until Director Chen finally spoke, her voice heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. My brother always said that the greatest truths were the ones that helped people rather than harmed them. A wise philosophy, Elena agreed. Your Majesty, Director Chen said formally, my investigation has concluded that while certain technologies may exist, their current applications appear to be serving the greater good of galactic stability. Alliance Intelligence will be filing no further reports on this matter. After the delegation departed, Elena returned to Jacob's workshop and immediately began removing her armor with hands that shook from residual adrenaline. That was incredible, Jacob said, helping her with the complex biomechanical disconnections. The way you turned an interrogation into a moral choice about her brother's legacy. I was terrified, Elena admitted as the last components came away. For a moment, I thought 15 years of work was about to crumble. But then I realized something, the deception isn't just about protecting my secret anymore. It's about protecting everything we've built together. We. Elena turned to face him, her human features radiant with emotion. Jacob, you've become as essential to this as I am. Not just maintaining the technology, but helping me remember why this matters. You've made me better at being queen because you've helped me stay human. Jacob pulled her into his arms, marveling at how natural it felt to hold this woman who was both vulnerable human and powerful alien ruler. Elena, what Director Chen said about elaborate deceptions, she wasn't wrong. But maybe the most elaborate deception is pretending that what we feel for each other isn't real. What are you saying? I'm saying that loving you, supporting your impossible mission, becoming part of your secret, it's not a burden or a sacrifice. It's the most real thing in my life. Elena looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Jacob Thorne, are you proposing to an alien queen? I'm proposing to the woman who saved the galaxy and then trusted me with her heart, he replied. The alien queen part is just impressive job credentials. Their kiss was interrupted by Jacob's communication system chiming with an incoming message. Elena groaned as she recognized the transmission codes. More diplomatic crises? Jacob asked. Actually, no. It's an invitation to the Centauri Mining Consortium's celebration dinner. They want to thank Queen Zexthera for mediating their territorial dispute. Elena smiled with genuine happiness. Our first success story is throwing a party. Our first success story, Jacob repeated, liking the sound of that. Does this mean I get to escort an alien queen to a diplomatic function? It means you get to escort your fiancée to a party where she happens to be wearing 8 feet of biomechanical armor, Elena corrected. Try to keep up with the distinction. 3 years later, Jacob stood in their private quarters within the royal compound, watching Elena prepare for what would be her final public appearance as Queen Zexthera. The democratic integration protocol had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, establishing a council system that would allow her to step down while maintaining stability. Nervous? He asked, helping her with the ceremonial armor she would wear for the transition ceremony. Terrified, Elena admitted. For 15 years, I've been Queen Zexthera. Tomorrow, I'll just be Elena again. Elena Thorne, Jacob corrected, and she smiled at the reminder of their secret wedding ceremony the previous year. And you'll never be just anything. You'll be the woman who saved 3 star systems and then had the wisdom to step away when the job was done. The transition ceremony was attended by representatives from dozens of species, all gathered to witness the peaceful transfer of power that many had thought impossible. Elena delivered her final speech as queen with the same regal bearing that had defined her reign, formally transferring authority to the democratically elected Voidborn Council. But Jacob's favorite moment came later, in the privacy of their quarters, when Elena finally removed the armor for the last time and stood before him as simply herself, no longer queen, no longer carrying the fate of civilizations, just the woman he loved who had accomplished the impossible. Any regrets? He asked, echoing a question they'd shared many times over the years. Elena considered for a moment, looking around at the life they'd built together in the shadows of galactic politics. Only that it took so long to find someone who could love both the woman I was and the queen I became. Good thing I'm patient, Jacob replied, pulling her close. Outside their windows, the lights of the void-born capital sparkled under alien stars, peaceful and prosperous after decades of Elena's careful guidance. And in the heart of the royal compound, two humans who had chosen love over truth, partnership over perfection, held each other and planned a future where secrets were optional and love was the only deception worth maintaining. The galaxy would never know that its greatest queen had been human all along. But in the end, that truth belonged to them alone, a secret transformed from burden into blessing, a deception that had become the foundation for the most honest love either of them had ever known.